Hello, I'm Rob Westervelt, Editor-in-Chief of IHS Chemical Week, welcoming you to the 2014 IHS Chemical World Petrochemical Conference. And I'm delighted to be joined by Dmitry Konov, CEO of СИБУР. Dmitry, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Great. Dmitry, first question here. Can you give us an assessment of current conditions in Russian petrochemical markets or your outlook for 2014 in key products?
Basically, when we look at the Russian petrochemical market, it's driven by domestic factors and international factors. For our major markets where we supply outside Russia, meaning Europe and Southeast Asia, we do see not tough but challenging conditions. We of course feel this slight slowdown in Chinese growth rates, which has an impact, of course, specifically in the synthetic rubber segment. As for Europe, Europe has been sluggish for the last several years, so it's nothing really new. We do see some early signs of improvements, but it's too early probably to make some conclusions. As for the Russian demand itself, we see still very significant growth in polymers. Demand, for example, we are still close to double-digit growth numbers for major products, which has been a good sign. Although if you look at the Russian macroeconomic performance, it's been worse than most of people expected, including ourselves. The actual growth was slightly above 1% last year, with expectations being 3% or somewhat around, which certainly doesn't help much. Also, ruble devaluation, and ruble has changed maybe 15% versus euro and US dollar in the last 3 months of 2013. That helped on the cost side, specifically improved our margin on the export sales.
Can you give us your assessment of the impact of the current situation with Ukraine, economically and demand-wise?
Economically, if you look at our breakdown of businesses, we do have significant, as you know, what we call feedstock and energy, where we are net sellers of liquefied petroleum gas, and also another big segment, which is petrochemicals, with all the products and streams there. In terms of demand, Ukraine was about 1.5% of our sales, which is not a huge difference for us. With all the, with the conditions close to chaotic in Ukraine, I would assess it that way, we still do see them paying and buying the product. So we don't see significant drop, although it's becoming a bit challenging. On the LPG side, Ukraine is a transit country for us, and also transshipping in Ukraine ports is with the product targeting Southern Europe and Turkey is a big part of our business. We haven't seen any interruptions so far with, as I said, all the chaotic developments we see there.
In longer term, how do you see Russian markets developing, and what's the opportunity for СИБУР to displace the current large volume of imports of petrochemicals, particularly polymers?
Yeah, we're trying to meet it with our with our recent projects. For example, we mostly closed the imports. Not closed, that's not the right word. We mostly substituted imports of polypropylene by starting up the 500,000 tons capacity in Tobolsk. We are also in our joint venture with Solvay. We're starting 330 kilotons a year PVC capacity in Konova, which will substitute most of PVC imported into Russia. In polystyrene, we did the same with our capacities started in 2012 and 2013, and we see this trends going on. In the longer term, we do believe that Russia, in terms of the feedstock available for the petrochemicals, is a still very attractive region. Comparing ourselves with the recent development in US, we do believe that we're sometimes more advantageous depending on location, sometimes at the same level with the light feedstock cost which US can offer, and that gives us pretty much of an optimism looking forward.
Okay. And given that cost advantage, do you see any potential for exports?
Yes, we do. When we benchmark potential polyolefin projects on the cost curve, we see them being in the first or the second quartile, with all the capacities also being introduced by US, this new stream of crackers. So we do believe that gives us opportunity to monetize the Russian feedstock advantage into products which will be both consumed domestically, because the demand is growing pretty fast, as we discussed, and exporting as well.
Okay. And you mentioned the investment at Tobolsk. Can you give us an update on how that continues to progress, and what else is the focus of your capital investment program? Where else are you investing?
Basically, if you look at Tobolsk, Tobolsk is a kind of dual story. It has two sides. Tobolsk is a hub where we concentrate our feedstock resources from oil and gas companies. As part of our business is when we purchase byproducts of oil and gas production, we transport them, we fractionate them, and concentrate that in Tobolsk. On the other hand, what we historically had there and what we're developing further is further processing this available LPG into petrochemical, into monomers and then petrochemical products. We have butadiene production there, isobutylene production there. We have propane dehydrogenation and polypropylene units. We have MTB, and we're further looking forward to develop more downstream projects there in Tobolsk to capture this advantageous feedstock.
Okay. And final question. I mean, you mentioned the key part of the strategy being the efforts to improve integration and capitalize on feedstocks with the upstream oil and gas firms in Russia. How is that, what has that meant for СИБУР recently, and how will you continue to progress that strategy of improving integration?
Well, if we talk about integration, there are a reasonably high concentration of oil and gas players in Russia. We quite recently signed a new agreement with Rosneft, which is one of our important suppliers because of the size. We now had the contracts until 2032. We also have very long-term agreements with Gazprom, Novatek, a couple of independent players, both in oil and gas. And that actually allows us to look pretty confident into long-term perspective on converting this available feedstock into polymer production and other petrochemical production.
Dmitry, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.